I'm just going to get started. We'll say hello to people as they come in. If you want to put in the chat where you're from and who you're associated with, if you have a farm or if you are starting a farm, that would be great to know. So this is this talk tonight is being sponsored by the Foodshed Alliance. We are a nonprofit whose mission is to strengthen sustainable farming, increase access to local food, and protect the environment for all of our community. We are really proud to have Dave Zelov as the co-owner of Kittatinny Mountain Farm from Wantage, New Jersey, where he and his wife make their living growing on 2.5 acres of certified organic vegetables, herbs, and flowers for CSA and farmers markets. David got his start farming at Rutgers Student Organic Farm while earning his BS in ecology there. He has farmed in New Jersey and Philadelphia for 20 years of his adult years, with short stints in between as a naturalist, a cactus nursery worker, and the coordinator of the Master Gardener program in Burlington County. He is originally from and currently lives in Wantage, New Jersey. We are also very proud of Dave as a longtime board member from 2016. Dave has served as a board member of the Foodshed Alliance and often someone that we hold up as an example of how small scale organic farmers can make a living. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Just a little housekeeping. We encourage you to chat with each other in the chat, but Tess from the Foodshed Alliance, and I will be monitoring the Q&A. So if you have questions, we're going to save the questions until the end of David's presentation, and then we'll go over those questions then. But thanks, and here's David Zelov.
Thanks, Eric, for that lovely introduction. I'm going to give a general overview of our farming operation, talk about how we started our business, and just how it's evolved over the years to become what it is today, how we've made a living at that. There's a lot of things to cover. I thought I wanted to, I'd like to talk about pest and disease control, about finding land, about all kinds of stuff, but it's going to have to be somewhat of an overview. If people want, more details in the future, we can always do more of these. Also, just before I get started, I want to mention that, as Eric said, I'm co-owner, and I'm half of the operation. Danielle, my wife, is the other half, and she's just as involved as I am. I just happen to be the one doing the talk tonight. And if you guys, hopefully there won't be too much screaming in the background. We do have 2 small children who it's possible one of them could bust in here at any moment, as there's no lock on the door. So hopefully that doesn't happen. So I prepared PowerPoint, got lots of pictures of our farm. I think that's always the best way that I learn about other people's operations, is just to see, what other people are doing, and to see pictures of their, setup and equipment and everything like that. So if you need clarification on anything as we're going along, maybe you can mention it in the chat. But as Eric said, hopefully we'll leave time for discussion at the end, and any questions that you guys have, I'll hopefully hit on everything. But I'd love to hear questions and have some conversation going at the end. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Eric, I think I might need you to make me the host, though. Resume recording. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That look okay? Hopefully it does.
Looks good.
Okay, great. um, so this is Kittatinny Mountain Farm. We're located in Wantage, New Jersey. A lot of people probably are familiar with Sussex County and know that there's not a whole lot of flat ground. So the slide on the left kind of shows the layout, and you can see it's not one big open field. Slide on the right shows one of the fields. There's lots of trees surrounding it. And we have, now there's actually, since that overhead was taken, there's one or two more fields added. So we've kind of carved out the flat spots on the side of the mountain, any available spaces that, that there were, we are using. We are currently in our 13th year of production on leased land at what was Fair Acres Garden Center. It did change hands, I guess a year and a half ago. So it's no longer Fair Acres, but we started out on about 3/4 of an acre and now have 2.5 acres in cultivation. Just to clarify, I know sometimes it's confusing when people talk about how many acres their farm is, but the 2.5 acres is actually like the tilled up portion of the farm. There's, when you count roadways and tree lines and all that kind of stuff, I don't know, it's probably 5 or 6 acres. I haven't actually measured it, but actually growing on 2.5 acres for vegetable, herbs, and flowers. The greenhouses are in there as well. We do, generally mixed vegetables, pretty much everything except for sweet corn, although we have tried growing that a couple of times. Raccoons ate every single ear this past year, unfortunately, so might stop doing that. But yeah, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, onions, potatoes, pretty much everything. We do some herbs, some flowers, and we've started doing a lot more seedlings in the last 3 years or so. That's been a nice addition to our business, especially early on. We did not start out as certified organic. Though we could have, the land had not been in production for multiple years when we came onto the land. So it just wasn't something we felt we needed at that time. But in 2014, we decided to go for it. I thought it would be just an interesting challenge, and I thought it would be good for marketing, and it was. We have a 50-member CSA, and we are selling at the Sparta Farmers Market and the Milford, Pennsylvania Farmers Market. Just a little bit about our backgrounds. Neither one of us, Danielle or I, grew up on farms. We both started doing it at college. It was the Cook Student Organic Farm at Rutgers, and thought it would be an interesting summer job. I did not expect to do that for a living. After that, Eric said, did some traveling and a few random jobs, and eventually wound up back in New Jersey doing the Master Gardener program for Burlington County, and then moved over to Philadelphia, where I met Danielle working at Weaver's Way Farm, part of a food co-op in Northwest Philadelphia. And we decided, after knowing each other for probably a year to 2 years, that it would be a good idea to start a farm together. So we set off on that journey. It was, when we first did, I don't think we really, expected that 13 years later, I guess, that we would, still be here doing it. We thought it would be, something fun to do, a challenge. We both wanted to keep farming, and yeah, we just went for it without knowing a whole. We knew how to grow, but we didn't know a whole lot about starting the business side of that. But we'll get into that a little more. We didn't really have any money. So, we weren't gonna buy a farm, and neither of us inherited any farmland. So that also, was not an option. So we took the course exploring the small farm dream, and that gave a lot of good information as far as what to think about when you're looking for land, how to maybe write a basic business plan. It was a good starting place. And so while we were both still working, we started looking around at different land. We created profiles on it was New Jersey Land Link, New England Land Link, I think NOFA, I think I don't remember what other ones, or a New York one, or may have been the Hudson Valley Farmland Finder. And so we started going around and looking at different pieces of land, and it was kind of fun to travel around. But it was, an interesting experience in meeting all these people who had land, and it was all private landowners that we had met with. And I don't know that we clicked with anybody. We saw some nice pieces of land. They were, a few hours away from where we were. And it's really difficult to, imagine upending your life and starting this very permanent business in a totally different spot. So we had been, originally grew up in Wantage. We were living in Philadelphia, and we came up here a lot to go camping, visit with friends and family, and we eventually found the land through my parents, who were customers of Richard at Fair Acres. And we went over there one day and just proposed the idea to him and said, hey, what do you think about growing some vegetables on some of your land? And he was open to it. And that was in, I think, November of 2010. And we started up that next spring without having grown on that land or know a whole heck of a lot about it. But yeah, again, here we are. Just some of the things, we were thinking about as we were going through our land search. And, that first one there, where do you want to live? That was a big piece of it. I think we didn't want to move too far away, and we just were familiar with the area. We knew that we had friends and family, and that there was good markets around, or a lot of people around. We're in New Jersey after all, and that knowing people in the area, give us some ins to farmers markets or restaurants, anything like that. We weren't looking for a ton of land. We had both been working at the Weaver's Way farm, and we were running that on, an acre and a half, at least when we started. It's a bigger operation now. So we planned to model it after that, growing, a wide variety of vegetables, small scale, mostly hand labor, and, packing things in pretty tight, close spacing, raised bed kind of thing. So we knew we didn't need a ton of land. Then some of the rest of their soil type and topography, I think we've learned a lot more about that afterwards. We did not pick a piece of land that had the ideal soil type and topography. We're kind of on the side of the mountain. As I said, we kind of carved out all the flat spots. The soil type, depending on where you look, the NRCS Web Soil Survey or in the book, it actually lists it as unsuitable for most vegetable crops. It's very rocky, and it's extremely well drained to a fault. We get 6 inches of rain. It's 2 days later, it's great. You could go in there and get the tractor in there. In a dry year like we had this past year, it's a problem because it is extremely well drained, and it's hard to get enough water on it. So we did actually have some crop loss this past year, but we made it. Some of the good things, though, that we really needed, since we weren't coming into this with a lot of money, we needed some infrastructure. So the access to clean water, there was a well on the property. Road access, there was already parking, and it was a garden center, it was a commercial location, so we could have deliveries, we could have a CSA there where people could come and pick up. There was already, like I said, water, there was electricity on the site, not at our actual area where we were growing. There's some buildings, a small area that we had for storage, and some other important things were, it was, at least for our type of growing, one of the things to look at is what's going on around you, neighboring activities, buffer zones, it's something that's required for certified organic, and want to see that you're not right next to a big farm spraying, doing a lot of spraying, doing aerial spraying or something like that. This was like kind of tucked away. That was a really nice thing. There wasn't a lot going on right around there. Though I will say that the nursery is not a certified organic nursery, but he did not do any spraying. So he was fertilized with conventional liquid fertilizers and stuff. But it was far enough away. And as we were looking around, one of the big things were, what did other landowners want out of it? And I think what attracted us to this site was that Richard and Deborah, the owners there, didn't seem like they really wanted a lot out of it. They wanted us to bring some of their plants to the farmers market. They were hoping for some extra, customers to come to their site. They wanted us to do a farm stand there. And, they wanted us to take care of the land. They weren't using all of it. And so for, tax reasons and just for not having to go and, brush hog it, they needed to use some of that land. So it was just a good relationship, and we enjoyed that. So like I said, though, we had growing experience. It did not really have business startup experience. So, and we didn't really have any or much money. We had a little bit of savings, but I'm talking like a couple $1,000s, not $20,000. So we spent that winter writing a business plan or refining our business plan. Perhaps we should have had that more finalized before we went looking for the land, but we wrote a business plan, and then we needed some funding. We did not have enough money to get the equipment and the startup supplies that we needed. So we went to the bank. They did not want to talk to us, really. No problem. Farm Service Agency, FSA, requires you to be turned down from a commercial lending institution, and that was no problem for us. A couple banks didn't even want to let us open a bank account. But Farm Service Agency, we started working with them, and you had to have a business plan, you had to fill out a lot of paperwork. It is the federal government after all, but they were, pretty helpful with helping us get started. We had to do some training as far as, record keeping and that kind of thing. You have to have a lot of records to get a loan through them. Thankfully, they let us use the records that I had kept from the previous job, since we were going to be basing a lot of our business on a very similar operation. But a lot of the times you do need some record of like your crop production in order to get a loan through them. And that winter we also figured out how we we're going to register your business, come up with a name, all that kind of stuff. And so we've got this land now. So how do we get started? We started buying some equipment over the winter. It was right up at the last minute, I think, when we actually got the money. So we borrowed $12,000 from Farm Service Agency. 5,000 of it was an operating loan, which needs to be paid back within a year, and 7,000 of it was an equipment loan. the equipment loan went for a BCS, walk behind tractor, which, allows various implements. I have some pictures of them. And we bought one with a rototiller, a rotary plow, and a brush hog. That was it. We then bought, bought some hand tools, bought, a backpack sprayer. We bought a salad spinner, some greenhouse flats, some irrigation supplies, as well as our seeds, compost, fertilizer. And, that was about it. We hired out the initial plowing to a neighbor. So this was just, sod. It was a field that hadn't been worked in quite a while. It had just been brush hogged on a regular basis. And it was, grass, decent amount of organic matter in there. And as you see, lots of rocks. We spent a lot of time rock picking. But we had somebody plow it. And I did most of the tilling then with the BCS to do the, finer creating beds and everything. But everything was by hand. We put compost down by hand with wheelbarrows, and we loaded it into the back of a pickup truck by hand. We put plastic down by hand. It was a lot of hand labor. We were just 3/4 of an acre. It was just the two of us at first, and sometime roped my parents into helping us. But we eventually, by the end of that spring, I guess, we had a functioning farm. That's just a picture of our very first farmers market. It looks like there's about 3 bunches of bok choy and everything. We lucked out. We got into the Sparta farmers market the first year that it opened, and I think only because Richard at Fair Acres was contacted by them to bring his plants there. And so Richard said, "Hey, can they also bring some of the vegetables that they're going to be growing?" And Ben and Mitch at the market said, "Sure." And that's kind of where it started. We also did the West Milford farmers market at that time too. And that was it. And we had 5 CSA members. So just a little bit of the infrastructure that we had started with. I said there was some water, there's electric, parking, a little bit of storage there. There was water, but not irrigation. And so I'm gonna kind of go through this like infrastructure, some of the equipment that we bought, and sort of on the timeline of what we bought first, and then with infrastructure, and then again with some of the equipment. And then after that, we'll get into like some of our growing methods, and try to go through it on, the time, each of those subjects on like the timeline that from beginning to where we're at roughly now. So one of the most important things that we needed was a greenhouse. This was that winter when we decided to move up here. We rented a house that was thankfully pretty nearby. There wasn't a lot of housing in the area. That was our very first greenhouse on the right there. Something from, I don't even know where we got that from. Maybe my dad had it. But we were seating on the floor of the house. We had no greenhouse. I think as the things germinated, we were like bringing them outside the house during the day and then bringing them back inside at night. But we did, I think we spent about $1,500 and got this structure. There was our first year, we did not put heat in it. We built it right next to one of Richard's greenhouses, and probably a little too close for snow removal needs. There has been over the years some climbing in between those and shoveling snow out so they don't collapse. But one of our ideas, and we implemented this from time to time, was we put a tube in between those 2 greenhouses and actually blew air from his heated greenhouse into ours, but no electricity first year. By the end of the, that's the greenhouse at some point during the summer or spring, we started filling it up. But being that there was no heat, this is the next house we lived in, we were still doing flats inside and bringing them outside during the day. We created some low tunnels and bringing them back inside at night into our kitchen. So we functioned like that for a little while. The blowing air thing kind of worked, but it wasn't going to keep things, if it was 15 degrees outside, it didn't necessarily keep it warm enough. I think we also, at one point, I remember trying, we got horse manure and created a really big pile, sort of or a big bed, I guess, in the middle of the greenhouse, and tried to use that for heat and put flats on top of that. Kept things a little warmer, but tried a variety of things over the first year or two. I don't think we had money for installing a greenhouse heater and having electric in there. And, it was a shoestring budget. We put up a fence. It's New Jersey. There's a lot of deer. They would have wiped us out. So this was a simple electric fence from Premier One Fencing, 3-dimensional. It's supposed to confuse deer, as they apparently have poor depth perception, and they look at it, they're not sure how far the 2 layers of fencing are apart from each other. So they are hesitant to jump over it. You're also supposed to bait it with like apple scent or peanut butter, with the idea that they'll come up, sniff the fence, and get a shock. It operates on a solar panel. The shock isn't terrible. I've inadvertently shocked myself many, many times over the years. But it works quite well for the most part. Later on in the season, usually in the fall, as things are not green anymore outside of the fenced area, they get a little more desperate, and we don't always keep up with the baiting of it. So they sometimes would jump in. Over the years, hasn't been so bad until this year, actually. So since we didn't own this land, let's say we wanted to keep everything movable. We weren't looking to, invest in a lot of permanent infrastructure. We didn't have a long-term lease even. It was really a handshake agreement. I think we had to sign a lease for the Farm Service Agency for, I forget what they needed, a year or 2 years, maybe. But, it was just, you guys can be here for as long as you like. The first year maybe was kind of a trial year, but we did. And throughout the whole time, really, we wanted to and needed infrastructure, but wanted to invest in things that could be moved if we were going to leave and go on to another piece of land. So tents like this, we created wash pack areas. So this is one exception. We were living at this place in Montague, New Jersey, and there was this old sawmill there that had a cement pad. So for a little while, we actually had our wash station there. The inconvenient thing was that it was 15 minutes away, so that we would harvest in the field and drive it back over to this 15 minutes away to wash it and pack it. Not the most convenient thing, but it was a nice setup there. And an example of wash pack area that we had set up, again, temporary structures, pretty inexpensive. We did the same thing with our CSA pickup area there. We, set up tables and people come in and get their stuff, and works nicely. Equipment storage. But the downfall of those tents is that you probably should remove the covers during the winter, or at least go there on a very regular basis and get the snow off of them. We didn't always do that. Refrigeration, first year, we did not have much refrigeration aside from 1 or 2 like household refrigerators. We pretty much harvested most things the night before or the morning of the market, which can be stressful. Things like greens or salad mixes, stuff like that really needed refrigeration, we would put in a refrigerator. I don't remember if it was the second or third year, we wound up buying a used 4x6 walk-in, and that's the one on the left there. And we used that for quite a number of years. As you can see, you can fit a lot of stuff in there. We operate it with the CoolBot system, which you can see in the slide on the right. Coming out of the back of there, you cut a hole in the walk-in cooler and you put a household air conditioner in there, and you it tricks the household air conditioner into thinking that it's warmer, and it keeps it running, and so you can get it down to 35, 36 degrees, but it doesn't use a ton of electricity, which is really nice, easy to maintain. And then after I think it was even maybe only 3 years ago, we finally invested in a new walk-in cooler with panels. And again, going back to keeping it movable, we wanted to be able to take it down and put it back up again somewhere else if we left this land, instead of building sort of a CoolBot system, a permanent thing in the barn or something like that. But yeah, so we got 2 of those, wash pack area. You can see the CoolBot system with the air conditioning and some spray foam around the air conditioner where we probably cut the hole too big. But we got the second one was an 8x8 walk-in, and we quickly used up the space in there. Can never have too much space for a walk-in. A couple years in, we applied to NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, for funding for a high tunnel. I think again they made us sign a lease because they needed us to have 2 years of a lease to have this to work with us for the high tunnel, but we got something like 90% of it paid for. It was 21 by 48. This structure, it's actually, this is one of those things about renting land, is you don't always have direct, control over where somebody wants you to put infrastructure. This is actually the second location that we were starting to build that in. We started it in a different part of the field, very close to the parking lot. I had gone to Richard a couple times and said, hey, is this location, you think it's going to work? We want to put it in, this area where we have herbs and flowers. This was like in April or something. So Richard's in his, busiest time of year, commercial nursery operation. Like, yeah, I'm sure that'll be fine. And then we start putting it up. We get the ground posts in the ground, which is the hardest part because there's a lot of rocks in the ground. And we get 2 hoops up, and I saw Richard, kind of walk by up above in his parking lot and kind of looking down at us. And he comes to me then the next day and says, Dave, I'm really sorry. I messed up. We're going to have to move the high tunnel. And Richard was somebody who was very focused on the aesthetics of the place, and it was going to block a view that he had. We had to pull up all the ground posts and take it apart and move it to this location. And we had tried to start it and build it in April, and I think we finally finished it in October because the farming season got away from us. But the tunnel was mostly for, we want to start doing more season extension. We, as much as you can have early on at the market and later on, especially if you have opportunity for, a winter market. But even for the CSA, you can make those early pickup options more plentiful by having things, beets or carrots, or just, whenever you get things to the market, if you're the first one at the market or you have them there early, it's better. And then also keeping like tomatoes out of the rain, things like that. So, the more tunnels you can have, the better. We've done some other season extension. I think when we first started, we started doing these low hoops. We got a hoop bender from Johnny's, I believe, and then started doing some of that. I think we actually shoveled that whole area out in March and then put the hoops into the ground and covered it with plastic. I don't know if it was really worth it. We don't do the low tunnel so much anymore. Then, so after we had the high tunnel, like I said, you kind of can't have enough of them. We got another bender for 12-foot wide tunnels that you can make with chain link fence top rail. So the 10.5-foot sections of the top piece of the chain link fence that you bend yourself, and you supply all of the nuts and bolts and everything yourself, and plastic. It's kind of, do it yourself. They give you some instructions on how to do it. Johnny's has a lot of good tips and everything on that. So we built a couple of these. Can do it pretty cheap. The plastic is attached. It's called caterpillar tunnel. Kind of looks like a caterpillar from the side. There's no end walls. I mean, you can customize it however you want. We did it the cheapest way, which was no end walls, no baseboards, just plastic is attached like that. It's a great way to start out. I think at this point, if we're rebuilding them, I'm going to put end walls on them, because lifting the plastic up and going in from the side and then hopping over the crops, it gets to be a little bit annoying after a while, but it's a good way to start out. And just some, our tomatoes in there. You can keep seedlings in there when you run out of room in your greenhouse. So it's back to, our seedling production. We started running out of space in there as we started doing some more seedlings. We started renting the greenhouse next to us. We never really exchanged money with Richard and Deborah. We had, we made some money for them at the farmer's market, and we always gave them money for utilities. But with this, we started growing seedlings for them to sell at the nursery, as well as seedlings for ourselves, for our land, as well as then starting to sell some seedlings at the markets as well. People kept asking us for them. So then I think it was a year and a half ago now, I think it was 2021. At the beginning of the season in April, Richard and Deborah came to us and said, we are selling the nursery. We're selling the land. Do you guys want to buy it? And we didn't have $800,000. So we declined, and things kind of were up in the air a little bit. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do. If they had told us that information in January, I don't know, we might have, started looking for different land, but this was April, and we really had no choice but to go through with the season at that point, and hope that, whoever bought it would let us stay there, or that they wouldn't sell it right away, and that we could, be there through the summer and finish out our season. But that was stressful. Again, one of the downfalls of renting land. But it was the great greenhouse migration. Unfortunately, one of the structures that we had was getting electricity from a separate house on the property, which sold separately. So we had to move that. And then we were no longer going to be able to rent that other greenhouse, because again, that was using electricity from somewhere else. So we took our high tunnel that had been out in the field and moved it to the original location where we wanted to build it. And we rebuilt it there as a real greenhouse. And then we moved our little original greenhouse right next to it. But big project. And but it was our first real greenhouse with fans and a heater and electric and all that kind of stuff. So it was nice. It was a pain, but in the end, it was a really nice to have our greenhouse right there in the field. And the other one was just kind of on the other side of the property, but you had to get your seedlings in a car or truck to move them over, and that was a lot of time spent. But structures are I said we tried to keep things movable. Technically, you can move these greenhouses. It is not the easiest thing to do in the world, but super useful structures. We've used them for curing winter squash, onions, sweet potatoes, things like that, once we're done with the seedling production in the spring. So some of our other infrastructure, irrigation. As like I said, there's a well on the property. We unfortunately we're sharing the well with the commercial nursery, and he does a lot of watering, and that was mostly between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. So we had to water before 8 a.m. or after 5 p.m. So there was a lot of watering at night. The other part about that irrigation was that it was mostly temporary, or seasonal, I should say. So there was no irrigation, no water to the field between just whenever we got to worry about the lines freezing. So sometime in November through late March. And when you're trying to do a lot of season extension, you need water at other times. So we came up with the concept of we snowed in our crops. We would seed carrots or something like that in February and shovel snow from the sides of the high tunnel, roll up the sides, shovel snow in, and that's how we at least got things to germinate in the beginning. And it worked for the most part. So, we wound up, as I said, the ground is like very broken up into these different plots. We had above ground lines running all over the place. A real pain for tilling, as we got bigger and started using a little more tractor based equipment, there's the inevitable cutting through the lines with a disc or getting things wrapped up in the rototiller. So when we had our electricity from the other part of the property was also being used to power the walk-in coolers. And yes, you can move walk-in coolers with a tractor as long as they're small enough, at least to the other side of the property, maybe not down the road. So I said we started out with just some hand tools, the BCS, hired out the plowing. We borrowed a tractor, but that's the first rototiller that we got. Very useful machine. Also takes a lot of effort, but we got brush hog with it. And this is a rotary plow. If anybody is not familiar with it, it throws soil to the side. It's kind of like an auger. You can use it to make raised beds. I spent many hours with this machine over the years, even doing some previously unworked ground, making raised beds with it. It was a love-hate relationship. Great machine, but that thing, especially when it hits rocks, will throw your shoulder out of place. But great machine. Again, lots of hand tools, and we still operate with a lot of hand tools: wheel hose, pitchforks, shovels, rakes. We're 2.5 acres, but it's still relatively small scale. Push seeders. I don't have any tractor mounted seeders. Starting out, we didn't even have a seeder. We just did it by hand, which works. Create a little trench, sow the seeds in there, and cover them up. Certainly easier to have a nice seeder. That's a Jang from Johnny's. I never liked the Earthway. I think if you have like nice sandy soil, that could work really nicely, but I found that it did not work well with the rocks. We were able to borrow a tractor, which was extremely useful with the rototiller on it. That was a really nice thing to have. We didn't have it at first. I think Richard bought that rototiller a couple of years in, and then eventually trusted us enough to be able to use it ourselves, and that was extremely helpful. I had this truck previously coming in. We used it as a harvest vehicle. We brought stuff to market in it. There was a cap on it, but always helpful to have something around to bring supplies around the field, harvest vegetables, all that kind of stuff. At some point, we bought a minivan, which was also extremely useful. We bought a minivan before we had kids, and then got rid of it. We got rid of it right before we had kids, actually. So kind of the opposite of some people, but you can see, throw some seedlings on the roof there to bring from your greenhouse to the field. It was great. Eventually we wound up, the frame of the Toyota Tacoma rusted out, and we had to buy a another truck. We got married in 2016, and the tractor was actually our wedding present that we asked everybody to contribute towards. I somehow convinced Danielle to agree to that. But yeah, we were kind of getting a little bit bigger, putting few more beds into production each year. And this allowed us to scale up a little bit. Came with a bucket loader, so you could even pick more rocks. Nice for shoveling snow, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, when we first moved up here, we were renting. And that was also a little bit of it was difficult. We didn't feel like we were, had a real permanent, it wasn't a permanent situation, when you're renting, it's not always the best place. We rented 2 places in a row that were actually for sale, not when we first started there, but it just felt like we were on shaky ground, I guess. And we had this like very permanent feeling business, and but our housing situation was not the best. And we were extremely lucky to be able to find a house that we could afford, and this was in 2018, after we actually had our Sebastian, our first kid, was 6 months old, I think, when we found this. We were pretty desperate at the time, I think. And I should say it's 5 minutes away from Fair Acres. We were a little bit hesitant, should we buy a house right next here? We don't have a long-term lease, but we couldn't pass it up. So I just went along with kind of buying things, investing in infrastructure. The house was part of our infrastructure. We bought a chisel plow. You can see, you can get up some really nice rocks with that. This is like a mini chisel, kind of field cultivator. $1,000, amazing tool. It's better than a moldboard plow. It doesn't turn over the soil. It just loosens it, and then you can come through afterwards with a rototiller, either BCS or the tractor mounted one. We got forklifts, so we could take deliveries in the winter. Eventually got a tractor mounted brush hog, which was pretty amazing. Had a wagon for the tractor. That's actually, it's still owned by a friend of mine. We don't own that. Black plastic layer, so we didn't have to put that down by hand, which was pretty amazing. Works really well on especially the flat parts. It's one of our fields that's on a little bit of a slope, and it's not perfect, but compost spreader. Like I said, I think we started out doing compost, actually shoveling it into the back of the truck, driving it through the field, and shoveling it back out. We were probably on 3/4 of an acre at that time, but yeah, compost spreader was nice. And then I think the most recent purchase was an old Alice Chalmers G cultivating tractor. We still do a lot of hand weeding, but this we bought in 2 years ago, I guess now. And it's got belly mounted implements, so you can look down, below your feet there, and cultivate in between the rows. But you have a lot of precision because you can see everything. You're not like looking behind you to see where your the discs or knives or whatever you're using to cultivate with are. So that was extremely helpful. We're a little still limited the size of the rocks that we have. Sometimes it, gets caught up on them, or knocks them into the plants or something. But this did save a lot of the time with weeding at least some crops. There's still some things that we don't use it for. Oh, we bought a trailer. We were, as we got bigger and bigger, we were first used the Toyota Tacoma pickup truck just for the market. Then we were bringing that plus the van, then the van and the truck, and then we were borrowing a trailer. And then we eventually, when Richard and Deborah moved and sold the operation, we had to buy a trailer. But it's nice, with any of this stuff, that we were on this land where we had some resources. We couldn't have bought all this stuff at the beginning, and to be able to borrow stuff or rent something was extremely helpful. And the fact that it was on site here, we probably could have rented from other places or borrowed from other farmers, but But it was kind of right there. So that was, we were very thankful for that. So our farm was divided up into, at this time was 3 production areas. Now it was about 4. You can also see at the very top there, I mentioned Richard was like focused a lot on the aesthetics of the farm. He had a degree in art. He created a labyrinth up there that's kind of off to the side of one of our fields. So you see, it actually showed up on, when you MapQuest or maps on your iPhone for a while, but that's what those squiggly lines are up at the top there. So divided up into 3, 4 main production areas, separate fields, which was inconvenient, but also, each one offered a little bit of growing conditions. One of them is a little more sheltered, one of them more sun, one of them a little more slope. Not that this was ideal. Certainly we would have liked to have, one big 5-acre growing space to grow in, but there were certain advantages that it offered. I mean, crop rotation could be good in that, you could split up, say, we do 5 plantings of zucchini. So first couple plantings could be in one field, and then the second, or third planting can be in a different field, and you don't get the transfer of, say, disease or insects from one planting to the next. So that was kind of nice. We put most things in, most of our beds are 100 feet long for ease of, irrigation, row cover, that kind of stuff. And for mapping it out, and it makes it easier to, if you can have just, one set length bed. Didn't always work out that way, but we tried to, and then create 5 bed sections. So, 500 row feet essentially of crop, and divide it all up by family. So, we could have tomatoes and eggplant together in the same family, or, cucumbers and zucchini together, but kept them in blocks to rotate around the field for, pest and disease control. Is actually, it's required for certified organic status to rotate your crops. And it certainly does help for the pest and disease control, for, nutrient management, to alternate legumes, beans and peas and stuff like that with heavier feeding crops like broccoli and cabbage, or, tomatoes to some extent. And the crop rotation, it's a little challenging because, in that lower down field, we don't want to put tomatoes down there because it's doesn't get as great an airflow. And it was, tomatoes, lettuce, some of that kind of stuff. So we sort of had separate crop rotations for the upper field and for the lower field. Lower field also, there's more deer pressure down there. So we had to, it wasn't a strict crop rotation in that, like, everything rotated from one space to the next, or one block to the next. The lower field had a separate one. And sometimes you skipped over a section because that was a little shadier and something else would be better. But we always made sure there was at least, 2 years in between crops of the same family. All of our beds were 5 foot on center. So from center of pathway to center of pathway, it would be 5 feet. And sometimes there would be, that's overhead. Sometimes, there might be, in the cases of salad greens, we did 6 rows per bed. In the case of, say, beets or carrots, 4 rows per bed. Kale, 3 rows, broccoli, 2 rows, peppers, 2 rows, tomatoes, winter squash, zucchini would be 1 row per bed. And the, it gets a little tricky sometimes with the cultivating tractor, but you could, set those, the knives or the discs or whatever you're using to cultivate to those different row spacings. But, when we first started out, it didn't matter if the rows were crooked or even or anything. And that was one thing that, really had to learn, was we have to plant in extremely straight rows, which I have a slide of it somewhere, but, started marking out the beds essentially with the G tractor and make rows for the crops, and either, you know, seed or transplant into those rows, and then you kind of reset the cultivators, and, you know, you cultivate where the plants are not. But everything starts out, or most things starts out in the greenhouse. We do a lot of transplant production, even some things that, you know, typically you would direct seed, like peas or beets. We wound up transplanting, and that's somewhat for a jump on the season. You know, we've had various issues over the years, whether it be weeds, or, you know, things like root maggots, or, you know, seed maggots, stuff like that. Especially, you know, early on when you're trying to push it and have crops early, you know, transplants, it's more labor, but, you know, you're ensured it's more reliable crop. So we've gone to do most things except for beans, carrots, radishes, turnips, salad greens, I think, are pretty much the only thing that we direct seed. So bed prep, I usually go through with a chisel plow, and then rototill it, either with the BCS or the tractor tiller. But, you know, inside the tunnels, we haven't done that. From time to time, we've experimented with some no-till. It's a silage tarp in there. You know, we didn't set up our high tunnel so that you could get a tractor in there. So that's been either by hand, maybe with the BCS sometimes, but we started using the silage tarps a little bit to you know, kill the weeds or cover crop, and then plant right into it, no-till. We've done a little bit of no-till also with the selection of our cover crops. We use either a rye and vetch mix or oats and peas. So I'd use oats and peas before a crop that was going to be really early. So say like early planting of broccoli in the spring. Try to be organized enough with our crop planning, you know, in the fall, that I knew what was going to be in that next plot. And so oats and peas in there, they would winter kill. And then, you know, if you wanted to, you come back and till that in the spring, or potentially if you have a nice mat of oats and the deer didn't eat it all, we would take the fence down during the winter, you could plant right into it. And so we did a bunch of that with and we still do with the oats. This is marking beds there with the G. That was for garlic. So we, for our nutrient needs, we use a product called Fertrell, which is it's organically approved. It's usually, you know, depending on what stuff you get, but it's, you know, ground up, can be dried blood, bone meal, alfalfa meal, peanut meal, sometimes dehydrated chicken manure. So it's all, you know, plant and animal based, occasional mined materials like rock phosphate or green sand, something like that. We've always put compost down. We've used mushroom compost. We don't produce, you know, we make some of our own compost, but not enough to put down on the whole farm. Also with the certified organic, it gets a little bit tricky. I mean, really to make your own compost, you have to be heating it to above 130 degrees for several days. I forget the exact number, to kill, you know, weed seeds and stuff. So we found it just easier to, you know, buy a finished product and put that down, and had good luck with that. And then we also try to, you know, grow as much fertility there with the use of green manures. You can see that's oats and peas, I believe, there on the left. So usually mixing a grain with a legume, the peas or the vetch or clover, so that they could, you know, produce some nitrogen for the following crop. And that's been, you know, all kinds of benefits to cover cropping, obviously, the nutrients, as well as the, you know, weed suppression, keeping erosion down. Yeah, and you have to cover crop for organic. There's some buckwheat on the left there, which we would use just as a quick space in the middle, like if we have 3 or 4 weeks where we're not using a particular area, we can throw a quick crop of buckwheat in there, and then you're supposed to mow it down before it goes to seed, as with many things. It's just mushroom compost. So we have a lot of weeds on the farm. We kind of use the IPM, integrated pest management, sort of, with any of these weeds, pests and diseases, you're trying to set up your farm so that you're using prevention and cultural controls as your first line of defense. So, with weeds, as I mentioned, we're using our transplants to try to get ahead of the crops. Always preventing weeds from going to seed, cleaning your equipment. If you have a big weed problem in one area, hosing off your rototiller before you bring it into another area, and just general soil and plant health, able to outcompete the weeds. It's all easier said than done, but other things that we've used, mechanical controls, stale bedding, which would be tilling, letting the weeds germinate, and then killing them either by flame weeding or maybe a really light cultivation over the top. We use plastic paper mulch, and of course just hose, sometimes tilling in between the crops, and lots of hand weeding. Started experimenting with some white plastic mulch for some of the things like that don't like the heat of the black plastic. So onions, and even like cucumbers and squash, like in the middle of the season, when it's really hot out, we've planted things on black plastic before, and it's, the little holes that you make in it, it just gets really hot in there, and we singe the stems of them, or, you put the crops in and then cover it with row cover, and it just bakes in there. So the white plastic, actually, we've started using more, and also insect netting instead of row cover, so it doesn't quite heat up as much. Insect netting is very expensive, but it lasts longer, and has some really nice benefits. We don't use a ton of plastic. I don't like it that much, and you have to pull it up at the end of the season. It's a pain because the weeds grow in at the sides, and it's trash that then goes to the landfill at the end of the year. Unfortunately, there are some biodegradable mulches, but none of them are allowed under certified organic status because I forget exactly what it is, but something in the manufacturing process is not allowed in the organic standards. Those are one successful corn crop that we've had, but that was nice for cultivating. Just some of the tools that go underneath the G there. Found it also really useful for hilling potatoes, which was nice. I took the discs off of actually the black plastic layer and mounted them on the toolbar there. And we can, you turn the discs one way, create a trench, turn them the other way, and you cover the trench, and then you can go through and hill them. It's saved us so much time with potatoes. We were doing everything by hand previously with hilling them. Pest management, crop rotation, keeping things clean, healthy plants. We use a lot of row cover and insect netting. Fencing for keeping deer out, doesn't keep rabbits and groundhogs out. I dream of having a permanent deer fence, but being on the rented land, we've just never felt that we could invest in that. We from time to time use beneficial insects. One of the that we've been working with recently was the predatory wasp of the Mexican bean beetle, which goes and lays eggs in the larva of the Mexican bean beetle and parasitizes them. They essentially eat them from the inside out. And they're available from some private labs as well. We got ours from it's the Beneficial Insect Lab in Trenton that's run by the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. We try to keep, lots of habitat on the sides for other beneficials, grow a lot of flowers and keep a lot of native habitat along the edges for that. And then with any of this stuff, there are different products that are available organically. Some people have the misunderstanding that organic means that you're not spraying with anything, and that is not true. There's certainly lots of farms out there that are, let's call them industrial organic or something, that are, using lots of different products. We don't use much. It is a last resort, but cabbage caterpillars get out of control at some point in the season inevitably, and we will spray BT on it. From time to time, we've had disease issues on tomatoes. I have used copper in the past, but it's not something though I want to use when there's fruit on the plants. I just, don't want people eating the stuff that has pesticides on it. Might be organic, it might be natural, but it's never felt good about that. So yeah, BT, we've used some time to time some other beneficial sort of bacterial products or beneficial fungi that you spray on the plant, and they're supposed to outcompete the other, the bad ones. And yeah, I'm not sure how well they work. I think it can't hurt. You always need to use it though as a preventative. It's not going to help after you already have the problem. And then, we tolerate some pest damage. I don't go and spray when there's just a couple of holes in the leaves, or another method that we've used is we do multiple plantings of a lot of crops, and so inevitably our zucchini are going to get squash bugs on them, or cucumber beetles, and the first planting goes down and we move on to the second planting. But we rely on some tolerance or understanding of our customers that there's some holes in the leaves. We say, hey, it's proof that it's organic, and people generally understand that. And if they don't, then they can buy somewhere else. Disease management, kind of the same idea here. We've the cultural kind of and the cultural controls and the planning, just extremely important with crop placement and the proper spacing of plants, making sure your tomatoes are pruned. The plastic mulch on the tomatoes, that's one of the reasons we use that, is to keep the soil from splashing up on the plants. Putting them in tunnels, just your general field layout, and thinking about the sunlight, or where your the direction of the wind. We drip irrigation is another big one. We have drip pretty much everywhere except would use some wobblers, little sprinkler things on, where we were going to do direct seeded crops. And so, with the drip, it would be hard you'd have to put 4 rows of drip per bed in order to get enough coverage there. And so we'd use some sprinklers for that. We use a lot of resistant varieties too. One of the best things I think has been downy mildew resistant basil and cucumbers. So if you can start out with a plant that's bred to be resistant to some of those diseases, then you're already ahead of the game. And again, materials are the last resort. Spray materials. We do a lot of record keeping. It's been important for both getting our loans, for getting a loan for our initial startup and our operating loans. We initially got operating loans the first 2 or 3 years until our CSA got big enough that was actually our operating loan to buy our seeds and to buy our trays or our compost, any of those yearly expenses. So Farm Service Agency makes you do a lot of record keeping. You got to keep track of, where you're selling your product, all your sales, your harvest records, your financial records. And then that, happened to be a lot of the same record keeping that we had to do for organics. So we need to keep records of our receipts, of all of our sales, field maps and crop rotations, anything we put down on the field, for any kind of spray, any kind of fertilizer, you got to record it and keep track of where you put it down and how much of it you put down. All your receipts, if you're borrowing some equipment, you have to show that you were cleaning it in between uses. Keep track of your seed sources. We have to document that a certain percentage of our seed source is from certified organic crops. But we pretty much, I keep a farm journal up on the top there. I write down what we did each day, what the weather was like, if we did any spraying, all that kind of stuff. And it's actually pretty interesting to look through. But I just found it easier to use than something on the computer, and you can bring it with you and just make notes whenever you're doing things. We use Excel a lot for making crop plans. You can see it down on the bottom right. We just have a list of every planting that we're doing, and that's the schedule. So for, say, a crop like radishes, I have it listed in a whole number of rows every time we're doing a planting, and then you can sort it for date, for crop, and adjust your schedule accordingly. So that's time consuming at the beginning of the season. People always ask what we do during the winter. It's generally this. We are selling at 2 farmers markets now. We had 3 farmers markets at one point. That became too much. We were doing West Milford, Pennsylvania, and Sparta. We've always been doing Sparta. It's been a solid market for us. A good percentage of our sales come from that market. We would not still be here today if it were not for that market. So two weekend markets, which can be exhausting, and we've done a weekday pickup for our CSA to kind of split up the harvest, although we are changing that this year. We've done restaurants from time to time. Just hasn't always worked out. They always want a delivery during the week, and we're just, we're super small, and I haven't always been able to make deliveries like that, or it's been difficult. But still work with a couple of restaurants from time to time. It's also, our priority is always the market and the CSA. The market, that's your retail dollar. On a small scale like ours, we wouldn't be able to make a living just selling wholesale. So for a restaurant, it really depends on the restaurant, but usually it's somewhere between retail and wholesale as far as the price. And then our CSA, started out with 5 members our first year, and we've grown to about 50 members now. That's just, we started out with the 1 tent of produce, and now we're using 3 tents. It was just a slow expansion. Seedlings have become a big part of our sales. Early season, it's just been really, really great. We don't feel as much pressure now to come to the first market in May with a full table full of produce. We sell seedlings, and it's pretty labor intensive, but it's also labor intensive in March when we're not out in the field yet. So CSA, we've experimented with a couple different ways of, we've done deliveries in the past. We've had pickup at market a little bit, but I think what we like the most is pickup on the farm. People can come in, do some pick your own. There's peas, beans, cherry tomatoes, herbs, and flowers generally that we let people go out and pick. And all the rest of the stuff, people are it's already harvested for them. We set out a board there, slide, and we say, take 9 items, 10 items, and usually starts out as a smaller amount and then grows as the season goes. It's an example of a share, or what could have been a share on the right there. And, on the board just says exactly, choose 9 items, 3 green peppers might be 1 item, 2 eggplant as an item, or so we try to give people as much choice as they can, and that's really worked out pretty well, I think. We don't, when we've done deliveries, some people really like it, but then inevitably somebody hates kale or can't eat eggplant or something like that. So we try to do as much choice as we can. Labor, it can be tough. We started out with just the 2 of us, and my parents would help us out from time to time. I think in the maybe 3rd year that we were in operation, we started doing work shares. we had one work share our first year, and then grew to having 5 or 6, and it's been really nice for us. It's been reliable. We don't have a full-time farming positions or year round. We don't have work available during the winter, so it's hard to attract and to keep people. We've had some great people over the years, and and people's lives change. They do different things, but the work shares, people are available one summer because they're a teacher. A lot of times they'll be available the next summer and want to stick with it for a while. So that's been really nice. But then we had a kid in 2018, and that changed everything. Previously, it was, Danielle and I were both full-time on the farm, more than full-time, all the time. We'd be out there until 9 o'clock at night in June, when it got dark. And that obviously was a big change. And so we did hire some more people after that, or tried a lot more to get people. And Danielle took a little bit of a step back because she was still involved in washing and packing, certainly. And we integrated the kids into the farm whenever possible, which is a little bit easier when they're young and will tolerate being in a backpack for a good portion of the, well, not the whole day, obviously, but, a couple hours. And sometimes they think it's fun and may get involved a little bit. But then the second one comes along, and then it's more complicated. And sometimes one kid, may be really into farming. Sebastian, our older one, was at 2 years old, he could confidently handle some hand pruners and would sit and trim the roots off of radishes or something. Aiden, not so much. He's seen there on Danielle's back, and was not just didn't want to be there, or would be screaming, "Hold me," or we'll see how that changes as they grow. But at this point, we had to then start them in daycare this past year, and then Danielle was able to come back on the farm, which has been really nice. And we still try to involve them on the farm, but in order to be able to really get things done, it's not always possible. But give him some trail mix and he'll sit there for a while and eat it. So that's been our experience at Fair Acres. We, from time to time, we've second guessed what we were doing there. We tried to find other land that was, talked about wanting that big 5-acre field. We've looked at a variety of other things over the course of the period that we've been there. There was looking at other land conservancies. We've looked at, other private landowners, and just, nothing's ever clicked. But from time to time, we were searching land listings, and we, couldn't afford any farmland in the area. We went under contract at one point from a place that we probably really couldn't afford, with a really old house that probably would have been a disaster, and we were under contract for a while, and then we wound up backing out of that, which was probably a good move. But when Richard and Deborah came and told us that they were selling the land, we kind of freaked out, and we said, all right, well, what are we going to do? We got to redouble our efforts to try to find some land. We had previously been in touch with the person who owned the land across the street from my parents' house, and we had talked with him a little bit, but he had approached my parents at one point asking if we, might be interested in buying it. I think this was right when we had Aiden. It was also maybe when COVID hit, and we we're just like, I can't even think about that right now. And then again, when the land went up for sale at Fair Acres, we got back in touch with him and said, so how about that land there? And well, one thing led to another, and we wound up the beginning of last year closing on 24 acres of land. It was actually across the street from my parents' house. The house there in the slide on the left is the house that I grew up in. So looking at this land, as a kid, out of my bedroom window, did not think that we would purchase this land ever. So it's 24 acres. It is not 24 acres of tillable farmland, and this it's actually getting smaller what we might be able to use, but we really like the property a lot. Our plan was to move over there completely this coming year. So it was those are two of the fields, but we began the second great greenhouse migration this past fall, and are moving these structures back over to this new piece of land, but this time we have to actually take them apart and completely move them over. And so we're getting into some of the things that haven't had experience with or didn't have to deal with at first, like trying to have a well drilled, bring water to the place, getting electricity. We're still working on that stuff, and it wasn't happening at the pace that we felt confident in for this next year. And then we were going to plant our garlic over there, and we tilled up a whole piece of ground and went to plant the garlic and discovered it was not drying out to the same extent. So we're going from a piece of ground that's exceedingly well drained to a piece of ground that is a little bit wetter and has heavier soil and maybe a seasonally high water table in parts. So, this is going to be a big learning experience for us, and we're going to figure out, what we can do there. But we're going to be at Fair Acres again this year. We're going to be growing in both spots as we get to know the new land and a little more slowly bring our infrastructure over there. So, it's exciting. We were able to get a loan from the Farm Service Agency again for this piece of ground. And yeah, we're learning. We're excited about the next steps. We're at least going to have our greenhouses over there. Yeah, I think that is all I have as far as a formal presentation. Let's see, and figure out how to end the screen sharing, I guess.
I stopped it for you.
Okay,
but we
you.
did have a couple, sure. Yeah, we did have a couple questions in the chat. So just to recap, how long and wide are your planting beds?
We did 100-foot long beds. So they're 5 foot center to center, but the bed top is probably 4 feet or a little bit less, like roughly a 1 foot wide pathway. 100 feet seemed like a nice even number. I think some of it was from the length of the field. Was we figured we could carve out a roughly 200 foot by 100 foot field in that first area that we put under cultivation, and figured we'd divide it in half there so we could have a pathway down the middle, have two 100-foot beds rather than having one long 200-foot bed. And some of it just had to do with you don't always want to roll out a 200 feet piece of row cover or plastic for covering, so it's kind of a nice manageable bed length. Or if you're painstakingly weeding a bed of carrots, 100 feet is more rewarding. It's rewarding when you get to the end of the bed. But we might change that. New land, dimensions of the field are a little bit different. We might have 150-foot sections.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. There was another one about how often you are rotating your crops.
How often we're rotating the crops? So, like I said, we put it on some different rotations for the different fields, but I do our best for particularly like tomatoes, the solanaceous crops, brassicas, the cucurbits, to have at least 3, preferably 4 or more years in between crops being in the same area, or crops of the same family being in the same area. It gets tricky like with that top field. We also have our pick your own crops there, and we don't have great irrigation down in some of the 2 lower fields, or at least we don't have good water pressure. So I can't get like sprinklers to get good coverage down there. So we have all of our salad green crops and some of our, high maintenance crops and our, pick your own ones, like right in that main field. And so sometimes it's 2 or 3 years in between those. But yeah, we aim for at least 4 years in between things. I don't know if that answers the question, but
I think so. And did you notice a difference in your sale came certified organic?
yeah, to some extent we did. I think, our customers who were regular customers and knew us at the farmers market, I don't think they cared too much whether it was certified organic or not. We could talk to people, let them know we're not spraying, or we're only spraying with organic ingredients, or those kinds of things. But it was nice to be able to put up a sign that says certified organic on the tent, and it just became easier. I think, before that, we were always very conscious about, not using the word organic. When we first started, we had an article written about us by somebody in a local paper, and we, we're careful not to make any organic claims, but I got contacted by the New Jersey, organic program at the Department of Agriculture, saying, hey, just so you know, another organic grower complained that there was some language in that article saying that, you guys were using organic methods or something. And so I think after that, he was like, I can see you're not making those claims, but just so you know, people are looking at that. And so we were always really careful. And so we put up this sign that said, we use all of these methods, and I think it was like 2 paragraphs long, and I don't know if anybody ever read it or not, but it was just a lot easier when we could put up the sign that said, we're certified organic, and people understand that label and will, it did help. I think it was good for the market to be able to advertise that there was certified organic growers, and just to, on our website, and for CSA to attract new customers. I think it was really helpful. I learned a lot from it. It wasn't, I think I, may have thought it was organic was maybe, not spraying or only spraying with certain things, but there really were, a lot of other requirements with crop rotation or having, habitat and all that kinds of stuff. It was kind of a learning experience to go through that process too.
That's great. It seems like it helps you keep track of everything as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your record keeping everything. Just a few more questions. What do you use for your seed starting mix?
We use McEnroe. It's they are a big composting operation and soil making operation. They're about 2.5 hours away from us, I guess. They're in New York State. So we get a bagged potting soil from them. In the past, experimented with making our own potting soil. It's just like, unless you have a really good way to mix it up, the nutrients never get mixed in properly, with the compost. And I don't know, you inhale a lot of peat moss, and it's not all that fun. And they've got a good product, and it's easy. I know a lot of people use Vermont compost as well, and I've heard good things about that.
Great, thank you. I put the link for McEnroe organic compost in the chat for everybody. And then one more question: what percentage of your sales come from CSA versus market?
Oh yeah, I meant to. I had some notes on a lot of the slides, and then I realized I couldn't do a presenter view and see my notes as I was going through it, because you would have all been looking at that view, which would have been confusing. Let's see, it's changed a little bit over the years. I think it's about 30% CSA and 70% farmers market. So that is a rough, might even be lower, might even be 25%, and it varies a little bit year to year. I think as we started doing more of the seedlings, that's actually increased like our farmers market sales. And we've also done some on-farm sales with just the seedlings. We've never done, well, aside from the first year when we started setting up a small farm stand, that just didn't work for us. We weren't able to staff it or keep enough nice stuff up there. And so that eventually stopped, but we started the last couple of years doing an on-farm seedling sale just at the beginning of the year for a couple of weeks. And so that actually, it's not quite farmers market sales, but somewhere in the middle there. It's not CSA. So that's become actually a significant part of our business, and we're looking at expanding that aspect, especially if some of the ground that we're moving to is, wetter than we want it to be. You can do it in the greenhouses, and we might not want to do, as we get a little bit older and maybe not wanting to, do 15 plantings of bok choy, every year, and some of that stuff that's really the super labor intensive stuff we may want to pull back from. And the seedlings are, a nice, you can do it early in the season, you're standing upright. There's no rocks in the greenhouse really. But yeah, so it's about 30%, I'd say, seedling sale, or 30% CSA, 70% farmers markets, and of that, Sparta is the bigger percentage. And that can be, the CSA, we feel like we've had a good return rate. That can be, it can be a little stressful sometimes, relying on so much on a farmers market, because you don't know what's going to happen year to year. We're confident in the two that we're in that they're going to continue. But new vendor comes in, or something changes, and new market manager, and all of a sudden a large percentage of your sales are in jeopardy. And so I think we like the idea of the CSA being a larger portion of it, but because of our scale, it's hard for us to grow enough. With CSA, we always feel like you got to have everything if you're not bringing in stuff from somebody else. So some of those more space intensive crops like winter squash or even broccoli, it's hard for us to grow enough of those. We can't grow enough for market. We just do them for CSA. And we couldn't really have a much bigger CSA and still grow some of those crops. We don't have enough space for it at this time. And, I don't think we have at one point, I think had a desire to be a lot bigger. I'm not sure we do anymore. It's kind of a nice scale in some ways where, I don't know, we still can do stuff by hand, or if a piece of equipment goes down, you can still get in and, rototill by hand, or weed by hand or something. We're not as stressed because I'm not a good equipment mechanic. So it's we can still do a lot of hand tools, don't break down as much.
That's great. Thank you. A question here about when you started renting the land in the beginning, did you both work full time on the land right away, or did either of you have off-farm jobs?
We had off-farm jobs a little bit. At the time when we started, we felt pretty confident taking risks. Right now it's a little different, where we have 2 mortgages and 2 kids, and it's, obviously it's a little different when we think through a risk. But at the time, we were younger and we're okay with saying, let's just do this and see what happens. We had a little bit of savings. If it hadn't worked out at that time, probably just would have said, oh, okay, it's not going to work. We'll just go and get jobs, no big deal. So we did work a little bit part-time through the winter and through that spring. I think our first year we grossed something like $25,000 in sales on the 3/4 of an acre. So, we thought that was great for our first year, but we weren't both going to live off of that. So we, survived some on savings, but I worked some for Richard at the nursery. We took up random jobs for a couple of years after that. In the fall, we both worked for UPS, being like driver's assistants. Danielle at one point worked for the high school cafeteria. And so, yeah, we tried to pick up money here and there doing, whatever we could do, but still work on the farm. And then, slowly our income rose little by little until we were able, I think the second year we did something like $45,000 in sales on the piece of land, and the third year was 60 some $1,000 is gross sales. So we weren't making a lot of money, and we still don't, but by year, I don't know, 6 or 7, we're able to get it up above $100,000 on the 2 acres. And with the seedlings, we've been able to go somewhat up above that at this point. I think some of it's luck, being in a good market and everything, but and being able to do a lot of retail sales on that. So we still we still feel like we're making a living at it, but in a sense, it's risky. And in the last this year with the drought, our production was significantly down, and we still feel like it could all fall apart at any point. But so far so good, and we've been able to continue to make a living on it, and not have outside jobs.
Could you speak a little bit more to your anticipated challenges for moving to the new space? Like you mentioned the electricity and drilling the well and the soil condition, just anything else that you anticipate?
Sure. Right now, as we speak, we're hoping that an electrician is finishing up the service work that he has to do, so that the inspector can come tomorrow, or he's scheduled to come tomorrow, so that the Sussex Rural Electric will then hopefully hook us up to electricity in 2 weeks, so that we can then have the HVAC guy come and hook up our heater. And so, one of the big challenge right now is infrastructure. These things they take a lot more time than I had realized. We contacted a well driller last July, I think, and we still don't have a well. I talked to him the other day, and he said, we're next on the list. He said that also in October. Hopefully we're really next on the list right now, but just that kind of stuff where we're not sure when that's going to happen, and if we're able to, are we really going to be able to grow on this land next year? I think that infrastructure piece, just getting set up, even we had a propane company come to deliver a tank and put the gas line in. I'm learning a lot about all this kind of stuff, which is interesting, also stressful. I was digging the trenches and stuff for this, or I, trying to reduce as much, having a friend help out with certain things, doing some of the electrical work ourselves, all that kind of stuff. But propane company come in to lay the gas line in the trench, and the trucks got stuck in the driveway because we were hoping, hey, it's January, the ground's going to be frozen, right? The night before, this day was 60 degrees. It rained half an inch the night before. And, there is a driveway going into the property, and there's gravel, but the gravel is 3 inches, 2 or 3 inches down, and there's mud and grass that has grown in on top of it. And so the propane truck sank down in about 3 inches to the gravel, but they got completely stuck in there. So, stuff like that. Are we going to be able to get deliveries of compost and stuff like that into the property? So far, I've been doing unloading. We got our soil delivery, and I had to unload out on the road, which, it's a rural, it's back road. It's not a big deal. I can have a semi trailer, parked on the side of the road, and it was okay to do that. But yeah, a lot of it's just, the infrastructure, getting in and out of the property. Are you going to be able to, park down in there? Can we have a parking lot and have people come in and park there? Are the neighbors going to complain at some point? There's just getting onto a new piece of land. We're in a very visible spot right now, whereas when we were at Fair Acres, it was there were these nice buffer zones, and people couldn't really see us back there. Now we're at the kind of at the intersection of two different roads, and so people are, you know, always driving by and can see what we're doing and everything. But yeah, our neighbor's going to be okay with it. I think from, you know, from a growing perspective, the big one right now is what's the drainage going to be like, and how are we going to deal with that? I think, you know, it could be good in some ways. You know, it was never a problem to get in there from May through October, I guess. We went, you know, I planted cover crop there in April of this past year before we even closed on the property, because it had been in corn. That area had been in corn for previous years. So we're also going to lose our certified organic status on that property. So this year is going to be, the record keeping is going to be a nightmare to some extent, because we want to still grow some crops. We need to grow some crops on the new land for the tax assessment. Another thing I'm learning about. You gotta, you know, farm 50% of a piece of property in order to keep it under the reduced taxes for, you know, the farmland tax assessment. So, you know, we have to grow stuff there, and we want to experiment with it, but we're still keeping a good portion of our, you know, crops that we're really relying on back at the old piece of ground. And yeah, it's going to be a record keeping nightmare, because then we're now considered a split operation, and you have to document more how you're cleaning equipment in between, or storing things separately, and, you know, having separate harvest containers and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, I think the different soil is going to be the biggest challenge. We're not sure. It could be good, like I said, with maybe there's going to be more water available, and you know, in a drought year, it'll be beneficial. But you know, we could have a wet year coming up, and it could be really challenging.
Hmm. Thank you. Another one in here is asking, what have been some of the most useful tractor attachments that you've purchased in terms of like the return on investment?
The chisel plow, I mean, a rototiller, you know, for all the potential damage it can do to a soil if used improperly, is probably the one key piece of, you know, key tractor implement that you just have to have if you're going to be doing any, you know, direct seeded crops. And even if you're doing some no-till or reduced minimal tillage, you know, you just have to have one for some instances. But the chisel plow, I think, has been maybe my favorite. It can produce a rough seed bed, especially if you're using it over, say, like oats and peas, where you're not worrying about something growing back, because it doesn't turn over the soil. So it's not going to incorporate it, but it loosens the soil, it raises it up, you know, kind of fluffs it up. But it's also, so it's a great primary tillage implement, and then the rototiller being the secondary one. But we've also used it for, you know, you could take some of the shanks off and use it for digging potatoes. So we, you know, leave the middle one on, and I go through a bed of potatoes, and it's not a perfect potato digger, but it takes apart that hill of potatoes and leaves the potatoes more or less on the ground. Yeah, I mean, having a bucket on the tractor, of course, and, you know, the forklift and stuff for just like moving things around the farm, or loading up a truck with compost instead of shoveling it by hand. But, you know, we use the chisel plow and the tiller are probably the things that use the most. The you know, having a brush hog is of course nice, but, you know, I still use the BCS a lot also, especially for getting in, say we have, you know, two rows of crops and one thing in the middle that's we don't need anymore, and I want to come and mow that and till that and put it into something else. It's, you know, our tractors, it's a decent sized tractor, and sometimes it's tricky to get it into there without damaging the crops to either side of it. So you know, still come in and use the BCS, which has been a great machine, but just not on the scale that we're at now. I can't rototill 2.5 acres with that.
Great, thank you. How do you go about establishing your price points on crops that you sell at the market and with CSA?
So, ideally, I'd love to tell you that we know how much it costs us to grow each and every crop, and we, have an established markup that we do to make money on that, but I don't. I think I came into it with some knowledge because I was working, as a farm manager for it was Weaver's Way Co-op. And so a lot of the produce there was going into the co-op for sale on the shelves. And so a lot of the prices were based on, what that co-op was selling things for, on the farm that I was working on then. And so, we took a lot of those prices and used those as we came in. And then, a lot of it, to be honest, sometimes it's looking in the supermarket to see what organic produce is going for. Of course, seeing, with other vendors, what other people are selling it for. If I see that there's a conventional grower that's selling it for, the same price, I'll probably raise our price because ours is organic. And so there's some of that. We do have, I don't have an exact method, say for each crop, but I think you should know what's important, and it's good to know what your best sellers are, but it's also good to have an idea of how much it's going to cost you to produce each one of those. And we haven't kept track of it exactly, but there are some good methods of doing that out there. And I think we do have a general sense. I'll use the example of salad mix and arugula that we grow a lot of, but we hate it, and we hate the labor of it. And we know it's a labor intensive thing, but it's one of the things that customers really come to us for. But, and when we look at our top 10 crops, so now we've been doing a lot of record keeping with Square. We started using that, I guess with COVID, because we thought people weren't going to use cash anymore. We needed to accept credit cards. But it turned out to be a good thing for record keeping because we can have all of our sales, we use it as a point of sale, a tablet, an iPad at the market, and we put even our cash sales in there. And so it then spits out at the end of the market, how many dollars in tomatoes did we sell? How many in, cucumbers? So that's all in there. We don't have the CSA in there, but so, we have a good idea that salad mix is one of our top sellers, and we don't have exact numbers on it, but we know that just during a harvest day, the labor that goes into it is like exceedingly high compared to, say, lettuce, where you chop that head of lettuce, we dunk it in clean water and it goes out on display. You're not like drying it and, packaging it and weighing out bags and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're going to give up salad mix. I don't know how it's going to go over, but I think we're trying to give that up this year. But, just using that as an example. But it is, since we're on a small scale, we're always looking at the size of the bed we have. And I think I came up with, we know what it costs us to run the farm. We know what our expenses are on a whole to run the farm and for us to be able to survive off of it and, pay our expenses and everything. I don't have that on a per crop basis, like how much it costs us to grow tomatoes. But like at one point figured out that like we need to grow at least, if you have, say you need to make $100,000 and you have 100 beds, then you need to make $1,000 per bed, per season. That doesn't have to be per crop necessarily in the bed. You might, if you grow some of these, quick crops, you can do 2 or 3 seedings of something on a bed. So, cumulative, you may be able to get $1,000 per bed. I think at some point I figured we needed about $800 per bed. And I know with some crops we're getting well over that, some we're getting under that, but we feel like with some of them, maybe like broccoli for the CSA, or some we might just be growing because we to fill out the stand or for CSA, something like that, even if they make less than that amount. But I kind of figured out what we needed to make per bed on the farm and went by that and kind of evaluated the crops based on that.
Awesome, thank you. And then it looks like the last question, looking back on your 13 years in production, growing your farm from scratch, what are you most proud of up to this point?
That's a good question. That's a hard question. I mean, I
Mm.
always, in a good year and when things look good, and it's usually they're looking best in, say, like July before the weeds really get out of control, just looking at the field and seeing ideally a beautiful, well-maintained field, is extremely rewarding. I mean, I guess, on another level, I don't want to, jinx us or something, but just, the fact that we've been able to, stick with it and that we're still here through, I think a lot of it has been luck and a lot of it is, perseverance, maybe through times that were harder than we, maybe we should, times that were harder than we thought, to keep going. We've have at times, thought about stopping. There's been times where we applied for other jobs and thought about, moving out of the area and doing something totally different and, wanting to stop, but we, kept coming back to it. And I don't know if I'd say it's the thing, proud of, because, but, feel satisfaction of, I guess, that we're still able to do it. I think, is also being able to be our own bosses. It has some downfalls too, but like to be able to set our own schedules and have our own business. I didn't come into it thinking of it as being a business, I think, or you should, or that think of ourselves as being business owners, but it is, and I think that's been satisfying, I guess. I don't know if I'm proud of it, but it's satisfying to, every year that we've been able to do it and grow the operation.
That's great. You should be proud. I'm pretty impressed by like the snowing in your carrots. Like my mind is kind of blown, honestly. That's really cool.
We're hoping for some frost-free hydrants in our next farm, but yeah, snow works in a pinch.
Yeah, that's great.
That last question was really great, from Jenny. I think that you saying you're not proud, you're gratified, is amazing, because I think that after people see this, they'll understand why we're so proud of you as a farmer in New Jersey and as a board member of the Foodshed Alliance. I truly always hold Dave and Danielle up as farmers that, in the quote from Woody Tash from Slow Money, farming is about making a living, not making a killing. And we've just always been so proud of the work that you've done, and that you persist, and that you can show the community that an agrarian community can still be a viable way of life. I'm really proud that you're doing this work tonight, and or giving this presentation tonight. And I wanted to share with everybody here. So I'm going to share the screen right now. If you are as impressed with Dave as we are, and they want to learn more, Dave is, for the first time, is doing the organic farming course at Sussex County Community College on Mondays and Wednesdays. It starts January 23rd, which is next week, but you can still sign up. And you don't have to be a matriculated student to join this course. And I think you can even sign up after it starts, perhaps, but the contact information for the professor, Aaron Schroll, is there, eschroll@sussex.edu. And you'll get some hands-on experience from Dave teaching that course with Aaron Schroll.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, we're co-teaching it, so it should be. Yeah, haven't done this before, but we're excited about it.
Well, thank you so much again, Dave. I really appreciate all this time, and for your always supporting the work and just being the farmers that you are.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate the kind words. And, I didn't put our contact info up there, but if anybody has questions or anything, in the future, it's, we have a website and Facebook page at Kittatinny Mountain Farm at gmail.com. So Yeah, thank you
We'll send out
for coming out.
We'll send out a recording of this to everybody who's attending, and we'll make sure to include your contact information. And for those who registered who didn't show up, they'll get the recording as well. And then this will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website too.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Cool. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Tess.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.